Hi, my name is Himmet Khalsa, and I'm with BCT department at Pima Community College. And I'm here on behalf of a grant that we received on educating students on sustainability. I'm here standing at Bill and Athena Steen's house of the Canelo Project. And we're going to learn more about the Canelo Project in this presentation, but what we're doing here is a tour of their property. And we're going to start with, because I think it's a great indication of who they are, we're going to start, they've invited us to come into their house to see how they live and this house that they've reconstructed over the years. So let's go on inside and meet Bill and Athena Steen of the Canelo Project. Okay, so let me introduce you to Bill and Athena Steen. They've been generous enough to open up their home to us to give us an example of what sustainable living looks like. This is basically the way they live their life. Could you give us a little bit of background, like where you grew up and how you kind of came to this project?
My mother's Native American from Santa Clara Pueblo, and I grew up there. That world lives a lot from the earth. It the houses are built from the clay, everything, and I grew up building, so it was just part of daily life always, and so it was no different than making bread or sweeping the floors or anything. So, and how I ended up here was probably destiny, but and we're here. I'm here, met Bill. He came out to photograph my first straw bale house that I built when I was a young college student in college. And it's my first husband. And we just needed raw shelter, someplace to live, having no money and no jobs. And so we put up straw bale, and I thought, this is a fabulous idea. One, we didn't have any running water, didn't have any, it was freezing, it was winter time, and so straw bales became, which I had never heard of building with before, but they became a great building material. And it sort of sparked great interest in me, and still does to this day. Every time I stack them, I'm like, oh wow, these are great giant blocks, easy to build with, easy to sculpt and to shape like a giant pot, and incredibly insulative, and they go well with clay, right? So,
and just briefly, could you touch on the kind of importance of the family in the build process from where you grew up?
Oh yeah, everything's done by family, and there's no formal learning. You just learn by doing, and so I build, even though I'm not a builder, right? And of course, since our kids haven't gone to school, and they just lived here, they grew up here. They're even better they build as well, right? And so that cyclical way of education and of just it's just part of life. It's not something separate, right? And schools and our way of learning has become so extracted and so different, so that again, everything is just, it's not much different planting the garden than building a house, right? It's all kind of one and the same.
And Bill, how did you end up here, and where were you born?
And I'm from Tucson originally,
Okay.
but I think I'm probably only 20 miles from where my grandmother was born, across the border. And my grandfather's also a little further south. So my mother's a Hispanic family in Tucson, and my father came west. He's a farmer, doctor from Midwest. And so I'm a product of that, but the main thing that brought me here is I grew up in an adobe house, okay? And I was part of that generation that went to New Mexico sort of in the late 60s, and was under that influence at that time period. And part of that was that it was for me it was an exploration of everything. You had alternative foods, you had macrobiotic diets, you had, you name it. But we had the organic gardens, and there was a little dabbling in adobes and stuff like that, and sort of bits and pieces of all these things. And I don't know, somewhere there's a building gene in there, apart from growing up in this big adobe house that I lived in. That aesthetic, I think, got me right to this day, and it's kind of what we've carried on in a lot of our building. But you look back, and my grandfather, besides being a writer and a reporter at that time, the thing I always found interesting is that when my mother and her sisters got married, there was 4 of them, he built them each a house when they got married. So, but evidently it wasn't his main occupation, right? It was something secondary. But the only difference is that he swore, having grown up in an adobe and being born in one, that he wasn't going to die in one. So he switched over to fired brick, right, of that generation. But coming here was more to, after living in New Mexico and sort of going through that time period, there's a lot of gaping holes in that existence for me, and I wanted to have it different, I'll put it that way. And so for me, the important thing was being in a natural environment where we could grow things, where we could experiment with building, where we could, pursue, things. I mean, at that time, I don't think we were thinking sustainability. Right. I'm not sure that was a term at that point, but it was. And today, I mean, the thing that guides me is the original phrase we identified: connecting people, culture, and nature. So it was cross-cultural. It was diversity. Let's put it that way: diversity in agriculture, diversity of people, diversity of building, what have you. And I can go on, but that's enough.
Well, that's great, and it's a beautiful house and an amazing site. We drove out this morning, 20 minutes really in on the road to this, and there's a river, and the house is nestled in. This house that we're in right now was existing, but it's been adapted for their lifestyle as well as based on what they know. And so I was going to ask you, when did you start working with straw bales? I know it's only one material that you work with, but we'll start there.
Life has a way of throwing you into things. So it was more, I moved here after meeting Bill, and he went and photographed my original house, and then I moved out here. We have my hut. We have no job still. We have no money. We have nothing. Right? What do we do? How do we exist out here, right? And it was sort of, the property was up for sale, and people are coming by.
I had to pay off my first wife.
Yeah. So
we didn't have any money to do it. So
what do we do? He said, let's hold a workshop. I don't know, for lack of knowing what else to do. Let's hold a workshop. Let's do straw bale, because again, I still struck with straw bale. And so we thought, so it was actually the first straw bale workshop in Arizona, I think.
I think it's the first straw bale workshop anywhere.
It was. But, and that sort of started.
And we did that with Mott's.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Okay, yeah. Uh-huh.
And David Bainbridge. And even her mother was here, even though she didn't approve of it. But
she was more into Adobe?
Or? Yeah, very.
Yeah.
So it was a great event. I mean, you had Paul Weiner, you had Steve Kimball. Yeah, there's a whole assortment of people that were part of that. And sort of that added, became kind of a springboard to our book that followed later, and Motz's Build It with Bales. And so, it was a momentous undertaking at that time. Yeah. And we didn't know what we were doing. Right. I mean, we had half a plan. Yeah. Right? But it's still there. Uh-huh. Right? Yeah. So.
And we're going to look at one of those original structures in a bit here. While we're in the house, maybe we could take a look at just a couple features. There's so much here that we could spend a week going through it. But I noticed here this bench, and this will give the students and the viewers a bit of one example of earth and straw mix. Can you talk a little bit about how this was made? And
Well, I think it's her idea to build the thing here.
Yeah,
so.
this is I love built-in furniture because it doesn't take up much space, right? And I grew up so that furniture is just sort of growing out of the walls of the house. But so this is a little table, and I was inspired to try to figure out how to do an arch. So this is actually all made out of little straw clay blocks and formed and then filled in with whatever and then plastered over. And what you're seeing is actually the real base coat. That's a sculpting coat that's high. You can see the high amount of straw, and then it's mixed with enough clay to stick it together. And it's, I love this mix because it's so sculptable, and I can put it on as thick as I like without it cracking, right? So it's actually, here, there's no straw bale in here, but, so we make little adobe blocks with this mix. And so that's little clay blocks. But this mix is also what we use for plastering the outside of the straw bales with, because it can go on so thick all at once.
so the straw gives it its
Tensile strength, and it keeps it all knitted together, and it's amazing. So there can be even a lot of movement in the bales without it cracking, and you can take sheets off like monolithic. It's a great material. I love it. It changed increasing the straw really changed my opinion of adobe, because adobes, if you've ever built with them, one, they're so heavy. Two, you leave one rain and they're gone, right? That melted back into the earth as they should be. Yeah. But these blocks, we were watching them, they don't melt. They go through hurricanes, they go through rain, they've gone through forest fires, they've gone through everything. You drop them and they don't break, they bounce, right? It's a great material, and it's allowed us to do a lot of exterior finishes without fear of the rain, just taking it off in one rain.
That's great.
And then the other part of it, at that time, I was obsessed with these arches, right?
Yeah,
and
getting it to span.
so if you go around the property, you're going to find tables, desks. I went through a whole period of building these arch self-supporting, so there's no other support there.
That's what I was going to ask.
No, in fact, we can all, probably this whole group can stand on it and nothing's going to happen. So it's amazing, you explore that geometry. And
I think it brings up a good point about learning in general and in the building trade. You said you didn't have a plan originally. You had kind of half of a plan, a few materials that you were comfortable with working in, and then a lot of it has to do with experimentation. And as we go through the project, I think we're going to see a lot of that, just little examples of mock-ups and experiments that you've done along the way to evolve the process. Well, thanks so much for sharing all of that. Why don't we go take a look at one of your original straw bale structures on site here?
sounds like a great idea. Let's go.
So Bill, this is really a bit of history here. This is amazing. So this building, when did you build this? And I know this is one of your original structures here, right?
This is the first straw bale in the structure, and we did this in, as far as we know, the first straw bale workshop in 1990.
Wow.
And this was kind of the beginning of a lot more to follow here.
How many people involved in the build?
It was fairly good size. I don't know. I mean, we had 15, 20 people possibly.
And I mean, that's kind of the nature of one of the benefits of working with straw, right? These people that came, did they have any construction experience and building experience?
Some. I mean, we had everything from architects to builders to people who, knew nothing.
Right.
I mean, it was totally all over the place.
And which way is this facing?
This faces south. This is, the classic old. We did it because it was sort of tail end of the passive solar adobe movement in the Southwest, maybe elsewhere for that matter. But it, it includes the glass panels were sort of standard issue through a place called Brother Sun in Santa Fe. So we brought those down here to fit, Probably now you look back and say, well, we overdid it with the glass on the south face, but...
Well, that's why things are added later, right?
No, the difference is that at night you start to lose heat, right? The solar gain's good, and you don't have to need to protect against it.
I see.
Maybe a little bit spring and fall.
Mhm.
No, these are mostly summer things, just to shade and keep the sun off the masonry that's here.
So this was more about in the wintertime losing heat from the inside as
The
far as having
glass?
too much glass.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. Great. That's really interesting. I was going to ask about the actual materials that you're using here, because we're going to look at some other examples. But like, what is the finish here? And
The finish was because at the time we got the dirt from Bob Barnes, was a fellow who had an adobe company, and it was just in that era where they're trying to waterproof adobes. So this is from that era. These are the asphalt emulsion being used with adobes. So we bought the same dirt and turned around and used it for a plaster, which they were also selling at that time. And we haven't worked with it since, but I mean, considering that this is now over 30 years old, I mean, it's
Is
held
this-
up amazingly well.
is it stabilized anyway? Does it have?
That's
any
what I mean.
cement?
It's
It
got
is
the
okay.
asphalt emulsion in
Okay.
it.
Okay. I
right?
see. It's mixed in. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And has this taken much maintenance?
Literally a couple of patches here and there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not so sure. I wouldn't necessarily. I think there's other ways of doing it besides doing asphalt. I mean, we've explored a lot of them, but that's what we did on this one, and we haven't had to come back to it. I'll say that.
Well, it's in great
So you
shape.
can see where it was when at the top of the wall, how it was when we first did it.
Uh-huh.
The smooth surface, and then the little bit of wear that it's had over the years.
But the material palette is very simple. You've got
Super
wood,
simple.
You've got glass. You got straw in the walls, and then this is straw or adobe?
Straw.
Straw in the walls. and
It's
then you've got
basically
this-
a load-bearing straw bale wall on the back. It was called a hybrid, and the structure is on the south wall with the wood.
Okay, great. Well, let's take a look inside. See
And I think I will go down and sort of set up the classroom area for you.
that'll be great. I'll see you there.
Good.
Wow, this is really beautiful. Hi, Athena. So we saw the exterior and we heard a little bit about the history, but a lot of the magic in these buildings really, of course, is the interior spaces. And so the ability to make up these curvilinear elements and that kind of thing. Can you talk about how you're able to achieve that with the materials and what materials you're using, and then also the finish that you're using and how you decide where to, transition and that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. This happens to be adobe, and which are sun-dried clay blocks, and mixed with the cob, which is a free-form earthen material with lots of long straw knitted together. And so this forms a tight curve to form a shower and divide the bedroom from the bathroom. And it provides great thermal mass for this passive solar capability of it. So it heats up in the winter time as the sun hits it directly, and then it lets that hot air out during the warmth that it collected all day at night. And it's a great, both the adobe and the cob are great ways to create sculpted spaces on the interior to satisfy our non-linear desires, right? And easy to sculpt benches in and play to your heart's content, for sure. Easy to create things like little niches or apple juice bottle windows for the shower right here, right? Or the finish. So the finish over the straw bale, the exterior walls are straw bale, and both are finished with just a simple clay, chopped straw, and sand. Finished plasters. Nothing else is on them, and they easy to fix, nice to touch. Right?
Yeah.
So, and the bench is actually a lime plaster because it gets a lot more wear and kicking and footage. So for a little extra strength, it's plastered with lime.
That's a hydraulic lime.
No, just
Or-
the type S,
Okay.
normal regular lime. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's been frescoed, so it's been
Oh.
painted as it was plastered.
Okay.
So you get the nice color. And the same with the interior shower. just type-S lime, plastered, and then frescoed, colored. So
Great. And I know there's a history behind the truth windows. So could
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, in the old days, no one ever believed that the walls were built out of straw bales. So every little building would have a little window that would expose the straw behind. So that then they'd be called truth windows. But yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing. I think I'm going to meet Bill over at the outdoor classroom,
Okay.
and we'll see you over there. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Hemant, hi.
That was amazing seeing that structure from the 1990s. It's still holding up
Still
well
amazes me.
and still performing beautifully. What are you working on there?
Just exploring like we do down here a lot in this space. Exploring just sort of the characteristics of this one clay that we brought in, which is kind of new. Just seeing how it works in terms of both texture and then a smoother surface.
Great. Yeah, you bring up a really good point about sustainability, and what you do here, you're not only building and creating, but you're also educating other people in how to build. So as an architect, when I've done straw bale projects, probably 90% of the clients are owner builders. So they're, in some cases, builders that have, or clients that have no experience in building. And they can come here from anywhere in the world. They can come to the Canelo Project and learn the basic fundamentals of these types of structures so that they can go home and then, and potentially in some cases, like a project we did up in Phoenix, they held workshops there, of course, with the Steen's assistance to bring in their community, their local community in Phoenix, this is downtown Phoenix, and build a structure, a straw bale structure like this that's code approved in Phoenix. So the educational piece is a huge component of what is happening here in Canelo and is also happening in sustainability, obviously. Bill, maybe you could show us around and let us know, or educate us on how you sort of teach people how to plaster here.
Yeah, sure. Let's have a look at some of this.
So what are we looking at here?
Well, what we've done over the years, is these have evolved, but when people come to learn plaster and study plaster, we need to give them a palette to work on. So typically when they arrive, they get a surface somewhat like this that they're going to work on for the next 3 days, 4 days, you know, whatever the class is going to cover. So it's just basically clay, sand, and a little bit of straw in it.
And
Nothing more.
This mimics potentially the exterior
A point,
of the
there's a
building,
point, or it can be interior, exterior, but it's a takeoff point for different mixes and different surfaces to follow.
Great. And then where do we go from here?
Well, what happens here, actually, we sort of jump slightly ahead because it's a little bit different, but this is if you wanted to go to what's kind of a typical lime plaster finish, just lime and sand, basically, not much more. It could take on this appearance, right? And there's different surfaces. This is a little bit more dull. This is a little bit of a sheen in it and slight discoloration. But that can be one transition from that, okay?
And what are the advantages of going this direction?
This is a little bit more weatherproof or at the same time, what happens is that at a stage before this is dry, you can mix pigment and water together. And it's just like you're Michelangelo at that moment. You are doing fresco, right? You're just not painting figures, though you could, but you're just using it to color a wall, like that blue that's over there on the adjoining wall. And so that's fresco. And so we will go to this when we think fresco or color on a wall. We rarely paint something.
I see. Great.
Okay.
And then from here,
So all this other stuff too, you have a mix of things going on here,
Yeah.
which are, I don't know what this is. I mean, there's a lot of people in here. Mostly our boys are in here because they're doing video work and they're experimenting with mixes. So that varies. But here's one example of what can happen here. is not my favorite carving, but some people like it. We build different layers of the clays on top of one another. So in other words, you could see the base was this darker brown, then it went to this more of a beige color, and then it went to another surface out here. And then they get carved, it gets carved away. And Athena was really very much the promoter of this in that she grew up carving her grandmother's pots. And so it's the same medium, it's clay, but here you just see what maybe a student might accomplish in 3 days.
Wow.
And sometimes you can paint colors, sometimes it's smoother surface. I mean, the possibilities are kind of unlimited with it.
So you have this concept of layering happening with the material, and also this build-up where you're building up material, but then you're
Cutting back.
Yeah, extracting.
And we used to do this with lime once upon a time in layers, but then we realized that because of we really didn't need to. We could keep the whole thing as clay, unless for some reason you had to have the fresco color. But otherwise, it's we can save what we cut out.
Wow.
And then we can remix it and reuse it again. And there's not many building materials that you can do that with.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're on the wall, and either they decay and fall apart and they go to the landfill, but with all this stuff, scrape it off. We have friends who replaced a 300-year-old wall in Germany of an old building. They just took all the infill material of the clay and straw out, remixed it, and put it back in again.
And you mentioned Germany, and I want to make sure we touch on this. You have people from all over the world.
We have not only done, it's not like we sat and invented all this stuff. It didn't happen that way. I mean, we've had one of our, strongest influences in the beginning was a friend from Germany who was part of the early, it's kind of a modern clay movement in Germany, a continuation of it. So he would come, we'd work together and explore and learn what he had. We worked a lot in Mexico, and it's a whole nother way of thinking and going about building. We've had plasters from Japan come, and we've picked up on their techniques.
And how do you feel as a country we're doing as far as innovation? And you talk about what's happening in Europe and Japan. How does America fit within that spectrum as far as?
Well, it's really interesting because you've got a young group of, it can be any age, but kids, younger generation, open to all these things. I think the hardest thing for me and this applies to the whole world, it's not just here, we could do better to not just keep replicating and not learning the lessons. In other words, I look at myself at this point. One of my most frustrating times is saying, I wish people would take advantage of what I've learned and what didn't work.
Right.
And they always seem to want to start over and reinvent the wheel, right? And it's like, no, don't do that. It's like, yes, a certain amount of it, but take where it's been left off and make it anew. And I think that's what I would add to that.
That's a great point. Yeah. It's kind of learning from your mistakes so that they can start there and then evolve the technology from there,
and
as opposed to making the same mistakes.
With me, I don't want to overcredit myself, but I'm open to that, right? I'm very open to say, hey, we did this, but look at this. This doesn't, And that's what this whole, sort of assembly of buildings is our lessons we've learned, the things we've tried out over the years. And some works, some didn't, right?
Right. Great. Well, that was really informative. I think Athena's waiting for me over at the structure to show the straw bale system.
No, that's great because it ties directly back into this.
Right. That's the pallet, right?
That is the pallet.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, Athena. Good to see you again. So we just looked at the plaster and the potential of the different options that you can layer in with the plaster. But let's talk about the palette now. Let's talk about the structure of the building that we're building here. I know this has evolved over time. So
long time.
what are we looking at?
we're looking at a very hybrid system that kind of came between, I think, Bill and I coming at things from opposite directions and finally fighting until we came upon a system, maybe 15 years of workshops, that we both went, oh, satisfied us both, right? We keep doing
Creative tension.
Creative tension, yeah. So happens to be the system that we've ended up coming up with. And it's, it's using the beauty of load bearing. So the straw is bearing the weight of the roof and structural. So is the pins, the bamboo pins. And so are the window and door block frames, all load bearing. So everything is doing a double function, double duty. So the bamboo pin, the bales are on edge instead of flat.
Which
so
gives
you more surface area for cheaper, and it's actually the bales are equal insulation whether they're flat. I mean, they're actually more insulative when they're on edge, so it sort of balances out.
R25 or something, where the code is an R19.
Yeah, exactly. So big enough, and especially with smaller buildings, it's nice not to have quite so wide of walls. But this we're pulling. We kind of predetermine the height and crank down the buildings, or we like you were saying, compress. We do a pre-compression test, and then we cut everything to figured out how far down we want to compress, cut them, and then the bales are all crazy up there. We put the top plate on and crank it down with these things to offer
Right,
it.
so you do a model wall,
Just a little section
of this particular bale.
Yes.
Because the bales come
Yes,
in
the
different
bales are different.
ties and sizes and
Exactly.
densities, and you
Exactly.
pre-compress to see how much these bales are going to need to be compressed.
And they're usually, for our Arizona 3-string bales, you're in the range of about 1.5 to 2 inches, somewhere in there. Yeah, roughly.
And can we talk about, so we're building up here.
Yeah, you see
you're
that
getting
doesn't-
some height, right, for the straw, so the straw is
Stays
well
nice and
away
dry.
from the, right.
Stays nice and
And
dry.
it sits on a double Y of CMU block.
Correct. Yep. And there's insulation between those blocks so that the stem wall is also insulated.
Great.
Right. And then got a nice sill plate in here so that it's easy to attach any windows or doors. Or even if I wanted to put heavy cabinets or something in, we could just suddenly take one of these pins out, put a 2x4 flat on edge there, and suddenly you've got, place to hang whatever you wanted, or attach an interior wall too, or something.
Great. So we go from CMU stem wall to our a treated plate,
sill plate,
and then we've got the bales on edge now, which reduces the size of the footing too, which saves cost, and also you gain.
And the roof cost can be narrow or smaller too.
Yeah, and then we build up to this.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a box beam,
Yes.
right? That's insulated on the inside.
Insulated box beam, and it's designed nicely to see. You can see how this 2x4 catches the bamboo pin, so it allows them to be load bearing, right? Catches that support.
Great.
And these things can go up and get wrenched.
So you've
Simple
got-
wrenches.
Yeah, so all thread runs on both sides. It's tied in.
Yes.
These are poured in. These are wet
Yes.
set into the concrete.
Exactly.
And then this comes on, and then there's a number of people that are up on the box beam with socket wrenches, right? And they're ratcheting that down and leveling that out so you have a good place to put the roof
Yep.
structure.
Yep. And then the rough, trusses, whatever, rafters can
be
go
conventional
all up
framed
on
if
top
they
from
want.
there. And what's great about it is because it's already under compression, then you can plaster the same day.
Oh, that's good.
You
So it
know,
speeds
you
up the
can
process. You
speeds
don't
up the
have to
pro-
wait for the building to
Yeah,
compress.
yeah.
Because on a wall like this, if the earthen plaster, even though it has some tensile strength, if the building compresses over time, in the old days, if they weren't pre-compressed, you might have some cracking or
Oh,
something.
it just slowly over time also keeps shrinking down, so that even the windows and doors get hard to take. It's uncontrollable. But these things are stopping it, and the windows and doors are stopping it from ever coming further down. The other thing that I love about it is you still hold the what makes load-bearing straw bales so amazingly strong is actually the corners.
Right.
That they're not broken. You have the running bond, and that makes it incredibly strong. And so, without having to put posts in, you're actually
You pin them, right, internally.
That one's not even pinned internally. You don't even need to. That's during construction, maybe if you need a little bit of aid. But I find it's actually nice not to, because then I can come back afterwards as it's compressing and kind of bang them into place so I could sculpt the walls.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So so actually this one has no pins anywhere. These are the pins. So there's a matching one on the inside as well.
Right. Yeah. So
Double
what
pair,
we're looking
so they're
at,
tied through to each other.
and these are every 6 feet, and these are every 2 feet, more or less, or
Yes, 2 per bale, two per bale. It's a great system that's very simple and uses very little.
And we should
materials.
mention that for Arizonians, this is permitted in Santa Cruz County.
Yeah.
This is permitted in Tucson. This is permitted in City of Phoenix.
Yes.
So Pima County.
Pima County,
Yeah.
Santa Cruz County.
So the new code, the 2012
Yeah.
code, they adopted the appendix, and all of this is written in now.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
great.
cool. Thanks to your help too on that one.
Well, thank you. No, it was a
Yeah.
great process, a great
Yeah.
learning process.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll head up to the house and
Great.
say goodbye to you and Bill. Well, that was fun. I learned a lot today, and hopefully our students did too. I want to thank you both for having us out here. I know we were only able to, in the amount of time that we had, we were only able to cover a little bit. So hopefully that'll be an excuse for others to come and make an appointment and visit you, and hopefully we can come back too.
Sounds great. We look forward to any time.
Great seeing you
Yeah,
guys.
good
Okay.
to see you too,
All
Henry.
right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I hope you found that educational. This is one of a number of videos we're going to be doing in different sustainability sites. This is a local nonprofit, the Canelo Project. So we'll leave information on how you can contact them if you're interested in more information. Really appreciate your attention, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.